2020 presidential election coverage starts now. Today we'll be looking at the 2020 electoral map between the Democrats under Joe Biden and the Republicans under Donald Trump. This will be an updated video from an older one I did, which is sorely needed because the map is constantly evolving and we're using different percents here. This video seeks to answer the following question. What would the election map look like if we included a silent voter case for 15% more Republican votes than are being shown in the polling averages? So the ground rules for this silent voter hypothesis are that we start with the JHK model as a basis for comparison, and then we go through the polling averages state by state and adjust them for the silent voter hypothesis, a long-time case for Republicans. We'll add a fixed percent to each state's Republican vote share in order to reflect the percent silent vote in the given hypothesis. Here it's 15%. If the state is already Republican, then we will not add anything more to the Republican vote. We don't want to overstate the case in states that already poll Republican. We will assume that states that have a silent majority voter already factored in, as there's less shame in voting Republican in a Republican state. So as you can see here, this is the JHK model. Here's the official JHK model. As you can see, Democrats are sitting at 318 against 203 Republicans. But you can see there are some states here, Maine and Nebraska, which have some split votes, and as a consequence they've counted it slightly differently. In my model I've just simply assigned them where they are, and as a consequence I have Republicans at 204, not 203, and Democrats at 319, and not 318 as they are in the official JHK map. Otherwise it's a very standard JHK map. So let's immediately begin adjusting it, and we'll start with the first state, which is Alabama. And again, we're going for R+15. Here, the Republicans are already 20% ahead. No need to adjust that because it's already a Republican state. Alaska, the Republicans here are 6% ahead. No need to adjust that. It's already a Republican state. Here in Arizona, we notice that the Democrats are 5% ahead of the Republicans. So with an R+15 silent voter hypothesis, which states that 15% of the voting population have either not told pollsters who they're voting for, not answered the calls, or maybe half of them are actually telling pollsters they vote Democrat. In all of those cases, if they then go to the polls, the net effect is a 15% boost for the Republicans. So in this case, that would put the Republicans 10% ahead of Biden in Arizona, and Arizona would now switch over to the Republican Party. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to our map, and we are going to find Arizona on the map, and we will let it tilt Republican. That's a tilt for Republican. We don't want to be too strong or overstate the case. All we know is that if the silent voter is 15%, which some of you in the comment section below can discuss whether you think that's plausible or not. I had actually a comment request a 15% video, which is why I've done it. So clearly there are some Republicans who do believe this is a possible scenario. If that's what you believe, then Arizona, according to its own polling figures, is actually a Republican state. Now, if you don't believe that, this is going to infuriate you, and I'll apologize for that. But let's just continue on. Arizona now tilts Republican. We're not going to say it's strongly Republican because, again, we're factoring in an assumption. So we don't want to be too strong about that assumption. Arkansas is 2% in favor of Republicans. No need to adjust that. If we go back to our map, we can see that Arkansas is Republican. No need to adjust. California, 29% in favor of the Democrats. A 15% silent majority voter, or silent voter rather, is not going to affect that. Colorado, on the other hand, is 10.6% in favor of the Democrats right now. But if you're sitting there with 15% of the voters voting Republican and not stating that, well, there needs to be adjustment in Colorado. And so we're going to go over to Colorado, and it's now going to move from likely Democrat to tilting Republican. And there it is. Colorado now tilts Republican in the 2020 presidential election. And then we can go to Connecticut with a 21% lead with the Democrats. And that silent voter, I should say, is not going to affect that. We then get to Delaware. Polling, with our only poll that we can see, is 21% in favor of Biden. So silent voters not going to affect that. Florida, very tight state, absolute swing state. Very important who that goes to. Right now it's sitting at plus 2.6% for the Democrats. And so we can go in there And we know now it's going to be under that, our hypothesis, about 13% in favor for the Republicans. We're not going to be too confident about it, though. We're going to make Florida now tilt Republican. So you can see, by the way, all these tilt Republican states are the states that are now changing as a consequence of this particular version of the silent voter hypothesis. So Florida now tilts Republican. It is no longer a Democrat state under this hypothesis. And for those of you saying, well, is the hypothesis relevant at all? Please remember, in 2016, Hillary Clinton was tipped to lead the polls. She was riding high at plus 10%, basically across the board, and she was tipped to win. And at the last second, what happened was that there were some voters, either Democrats who dropped out, as many of the Democrats never forget to remind me in the comment section below, or silent Republicans, as the Republicans never ceased to mention to me in the comments below. There is somebody there who switched their votes compared to the polls pretty evenly across the board in some of the key states anyway. And that tipped the election toward the Republicans. So silent voter did exist back then. And what I would say is that it probably exists today. The question is not whether it exists, but how important that vote is. Anyway, we're sitting at 15%. And Georgia's already a Republican state. No need to adjust that state. Hawaii, let's move on to Hawaii. 27% in favor of Biden. Safe. Doesn't matter if there's 15% sitting there who are going to vote Republican. It won't affect Hawaii. Idaho, 25% in favor of Trump. So a silent voter would just make it more of a Trump state. Indiana, 14% in favor of Trump. So no need to adjust that state. Iowa, 1.8% in favor of Trump. No need to adjust that state. Kansas, 9.5% in favor of Trump. Again, no need to adjust that state. Kentucky, another Trump state, 16.2% in favor of Trump. No need to adjust Kentucky. Louisiana, 16% in favor of Trump. No need to adjust Louisiana. Again, we want to be conservative in our projections, not optimistic. I'm not here to just make up scenarios for you. I'm here to explain what this scenario would look like. Maine is an interesting case. In our previous video, which you might want to check out, which was R+10%, in which we went for a 10% silent voter scenario, Maine did not flip to the Republicans, but in this video, as with a few of the others you might have seen, Maine is actually going to flip under that scenario. So if the polls reflect what the polls will be on the day before the election, and then we adjust it for that 15% silent voter, Maine is no longer a Democrat state. Maine now will tilt Republican. So it loses its Democratic status. It's now a Republican state. Let's continue on. So there's something unique that's happened as a consequence of this particular hypothesis. There's Maryland, 24% in favor for Biden. There is no conceivable silent voter, unless 1/4 of the population are silent voters, that's going to tip that. Massachusetts, 34% in favor of Biden. So unless we have 1/3 of the U.S. population who's lying about their poll figures, Massachusetts just isn't going to flip, at least if you believe the polls. Here's Michigan. Biden is up 7.6%, and under our 15% scenario for the silent Trump voter, Michigan now flips. Key Rust Belt state, very important for either the Democrats or the Republicans to get a hold of this thing, because it's going to determine, the Rust Belt and Florida are probably going to determine who the victor is, and Michigan has now flipped Republican under this thesis. Let's keep going. There's Minnesota. Minnesota, 7.7% in favor of Biden. But under our thesis, 7.7 is not enough to beat the 15% Republican adjustment that we expect as a consequence of this hypothesis. And so Minnesota, not a Rust Belt state, but there is an iron part here, iron smelting part here. But it will now flip from a previously Democrat position, if you just trusted the polls, to a Republican position with this silent voter adjustment, which, again, there was a silent voter last time, there will be a silent voter this time. The question is not whether it's there, really. It's how big is that silent voter, and does it tip Republican or Democrat? And so if you disagree with the 15% hypothesis, and, frankly, I think 15 maybe is a little bit optimistic, honestly. It's only because there are people who think that 15 is a legitimate thing, which it might be. I might be proven wrong at the end that we're doing it this way. then let me know in the comment section below. But Mississippi is 12.5% in favor of the Republicans, so it's not going to change. Missouri, 6.5% in favor of the Republicans. It's already a Republican state. Adjusting it would just make it, more Republican. So no point in doing that. Montana, 8.5% in favor of the Republicans. No need to adjust this. Nebraska, 2% in favor of the Republicans. And as we can see here, we have, according to the JHK model, listed it perhaps a little optimistically as a strong Republican state. Here's Nevada, and that's 5.7% in favor of the Democrats right now. But you factor in that silent voter, and Nevada is going to flip in the 2020 election. And so Nevada is going to switch from a likely Democrat state to tilting Republican, as per our very conservative estimation, following on from our R+15 hypothesis. So it's New Hampshire. New Hampshire, 6.7% in favor of Biden, and New Hampshire is now going to flip. We thought, according to the polls, New Hampshire, Democrat state. No. According to this hypothesis, New Hampshire now flips to a Republican state. So you can already see New Hampshire, Maine, Michigan, Montana, Colorado, Arizona, Nevada, and Florida have all now flipped as a consequence of us believing that there is a silent voter and that the quantity of that is about 15%. Let's continue. In this case, exactly 15%. New Jersey, strong Democrat state, plus 19.2% in favor of the Democrats. So 15% silent voter, not going to overturn it. But hey, between now and the election, these polls might drift in one direction or the other. If they drift to sort of 4% down toward Trump, then you got Biden and Trump at plus 15, and then with that hypothesis, they're neck and neck. So, but for now, we're just going to say we're going to be very strict. There is no case right now that New Jersey, even under this hypothesis, would become a red state. It's not going to happen. New Mexico, plus 13% for Biden. This classic case didn't apply in the R+10 scenario. It does apply in the R+15 scenario. New Mexico, previously what we thought of as a solid Democrat state, is no longer solid. It loses its mantle as a solid Democrat state, and it now tilts Republican. So we have New Mexico tilting Republican, and the Republicans are taking the entire South, it looks like. New York. So New York is 26.7% in favor of Biden. So unless you have 1/4 of the population hiding their votes, it's just not going to change from a Democrat state, solid Democrat state. North Carolina, 1.6% in favor of Biden right now polling. So we class North Carolina as a Democrat state. But wait, silent voter, 15%, R+15, says that this is now 14 points in favor of Trump. So North Carolina is going to lose its mantle as a Democrat state, rather. Oh, right now actually it was listed as a toss-up, interestingly enough. I think actually those of you who are sort of plugged in will have caught me up on that. North Carolina is very clearly the toss-up state in this election. Nobody knows where it's going to go. The Democrats say it's Democrat. Republicans say it's going to go Republican. But, factor in a silent voter, and this, we can safely say, would tilt Republican at the very least. Very conservative estimate under this scenario. So North Carolina now tilts Republican. We can go on. North Dakota, 25% in favor of Trump. No need to adjust that unless you want to make that 40% in favor of Trump. Just a ridiculous adjustment. They're both solid Trump states. Ohio, 1% in favor of Trump. Ohio's already listed as a Republican state under the JHK model. No need to adjust that. Oklahoma, 23.7%. Latest polls in favor of Trump. Poll averages, rather. So no need to adjust that. It's a Trump state. Here we go. Oregon, Biden plus 12% in our R+10 model. Oregon didn't change, but you know what? We have an R+15 model now. And Oregon, previously a solid Democrat state. Remember, the Democrats owned the entire West Coast and the entire Northeast Coast. But suddenly, it's been broken. Their Democrat wall is broken under this thesis. Goes from solid Democrat to at least tilting Republican. So Oregon is completely changed. Washington and California totally separated now. Let's keep going. Pennsylvania, key Rust Belt state, where Biden was born. Not Biden's home state, because it's not where he runs, but it is where he was born. It's plus 5% for Biden right now. That's where it's polling. You can see Trump's close neck and neck. Factor in that silent voter thesis. And Pennsylvania, key Rust Belt state, they're both gunning for it, has lost its Democrat mantle. Not only that, it at the very least now tilts Republican. Pennsylvania is now a Republican state, which is shocking. Key Rust Belt state, they're fighting over it as we speak. But we can already see under this, if you believe this thesis, Pennsylvania is already a Republican state. South Carolina, plus 6.8% in favor of Trump. South Carolina is a Republican state. No need to adjust that. Tennessee, another solid Republican state, 12.3% in favor of Donald Trump. No need to adjust that. Texas, 1.0% in favor of Trump. Let's just see where we had it here. So Texas was likely Republican under this model, and so there's no need to change that. Texas stays Republican. Let's keep going through this. Utah, solid Trump territory, plus 11.8% in favor of Trump. No need to adjust that. Silent voter, doesn't matter. Virginia, okay, here is a state that under R+10 in our prior video, which I'd encourage you to take a look at, did not flip. The Democrats held Virginia, but R+15, and the Republicans are now 5% ahead in Virginia. Virginia, at the very least, tilts Republican. So suddenly, with the current polls we currently have, Virginia is not likely Democrat as it's listed, but is now really a tilt Republican state. So just to recap right now, we got Maine, we got Pennsylvania, Michigan, Montana, Colorado, New Mexico, Arizona, Nevada, Oregon, Virginia, if I didn't already say, North Carolina, and Florida. All of these have completely changed their colors as a consequence of this thesis. So, I mean, which begs the question, which states haven't and why? Because this thesis it just changes all of them, it seems like. Here's Washington, 25% in favor of Biden. Washington, this is Washington State, so Western state, very solidly Democrat. And yeah, there's absolutely no way that any silent voter, no rational man would tell you that a silent voter could change that. So West Virginia, 37% in favor of Trump. Strong Trump territory. No need to adjust that. Finally, Wisconsin. Wisconsin with its 6.5% tilt in favor of Biden. This is key contested territory. Actually, a couple elections ago, nobody really thought Wisconsin would tilt Trump. I remember in the 2016 election, it wasn't possible, but I think it did. We can check that, but I'm pretty sure Wisconsin tipped Republican, shockingly, to everybody. But again, it's 6.5% up. You factor in that silent voter, and Wisconsin, in 2020, loses its Democrat mantle. Key Rust Belt state. All these states right up here, all Rust Belt states. Wisconsin, key 10 electoral college votes, loses its likely Democrat status and tilts Republican. So what's left of the Rust Belt? Illinois, that's it. So let's just continue through this, see if we covered all the states. Yeah, we've covered all the states that 538 offers. And this is the map we're sitting on now. This is the adjusted map, R+15. In this scenario, those of you who are watching this and believe that there's a 15% silent vote, and the Republicans are now sitting at 363 electoral college votes against the Democrats 175, with the polls today as they currently stand, and just an estimation of the silent voter. 270 votes is what you need to win the electoral college. You can see that as represented by this arrow down here, and all this territory is excess Republican territory. And you can see, remember, all the tilt states, if you remember, are states that we turned as a consequence of the R+15 hypothesis. So you can actually see this box represents the consequence of a 15% silent voter hypothesis. That's the entire consequence. You can see prior to that, well, the Republicans were behind the 270 needed to win. You factor in that hypothesis. They're not just ahead of 270, it's a blowout. The Republicans at 363 against the Democrats 175. I believe in the 2016 election, Republicans had 306 electoral college votes. So they're now sort of 57 votes, electoral college votes, ahead of their previous status, which is 303, which itself was considered a major victory for the Republicans in 2016. So this is the Trump landslide victory case. For those of you who are Trumpsters, I can hear you going, yeah, in the background. For those of you who are Democrats, it's boo. But no matter what side of the political spectrum you're on, tell me, do you think this is a silly scenario? If so, why? And if you think it's a silly scenario, tell me, what do you think that silent voter is going to be in this election? Is it going to be larger than what it was in the prior election? Is it going to be much smaller? Why do you think that is? And if you want me to make a video with a particular differential R plus whatever, D plus whatever, let me know and I'll do it, and we can take a look at that. So hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a like, give it a follow, give it a subscribe, and thanks so much for watching.